Hello and welcome. For many, the idea of an African American becoming the world's most powerful man was a dream they didn't expect to see come true in their lifetime. A new era in American politics begins next week as Barack Obama takes the oath, making him the 44th President of the United States of America. But where does reality meet expectation? Challenges facing the next president include the crippled U.S. economy, with jobs on the line and a credit crunch that doesn't seem to be shifting. And he also has to deal with conflicts overseas, including the dangerous and difficult situation in an increasingly volatile Afghanistan, and a stalemate in Iraq, where American casualties continue to mount. Then there are long-term issues such as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where America's position has always been questioned. Barack Obama also has another deeper-rooted issue on his radar, that of a divided America, not only along political and economic lines, but one where the color of a person's skin still matters. So today we ask, can America's first black president begin to untangle the knots of social division? For perspective on this, we're joined by an American politician who's faced challenges on two fronts. Not only is he one of the few African-American politicians in the US system, but he's also the first Muslim congressman. Keith Ellison, who represents the Minneapolis area, joins us here in Washington, D.C. Now remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room and take part. We also welcome emails and texts on the show as well. Congressman Ellison, I want to welcome you very much into the show, and it's good to talk with you again.
Pleased to be here, Riz.
Thank you. And the world is expecting a huge change once Barack Obama enters the White House. Is too much expectation being put onto this man?
I think so. I hope that people understand that you have to make the change in a graduated way, that the problems are enormous and you will not have immediate change overnight. But I think that he's already set a tone that that signals real and definitive change, and I think that he needs to support.
What do you believe his priority should be?
I think his first priority should be the economy. The American people are in a difficult situation. Unemployment is mounting. We're hoping that we can avoid 10% unemployment, but unfortunately we're headed that direction. But I also think that he cannot turn his attention away from crisis across the globe. Whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan or the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, or even in the Congo, where things are really flaring up as well. The world needs his attention, and we're hoping that the United States can once again be that moral leader around the globe.
Now, you know, Barack Obama in his campaign seemed to distance himself from the accusations made, or false accusations. They shouldn't have even been accusations that he was Muslim. Do you think that, you know, the way the word Muslim was being played around in the campaign, the issue regarding that might change now things have settled down?
Well, hopefully they will, God willing. The fact is that Colin Powell, General Powell, set the record straight on that. He said that the answer is that he's not Muslim, he's Christian, but the real answer is that it shouldn't make any difference, and that any 7-year-old child growing up in America who is Muslim should be able to dream that he or she could become president one day. And so I was very grateful to General Powell when he made that clarification, because America is a society of religious tolerance and pluralism, and that's a value that I'm afraid was put to the test during the election.
Yes, certainly. I mean, how did you feel about that? The reports obviously that came out that you'd offered to speak on his behalf in Cedar Rapids, and his campaign people had said, "Well, listen, it's not a good idea."
Well, you know, and you develop thick skin when you're in the political business. I understood their reasoning for it. We won the election, so I was very active and helpful in my own state of Minnesota, and was happy to do that.
Let's look at some of the issues you're championing. You've been very active in a number of ways. One of the ones is Somalia, where you're looking for aid to Somalia. And of course, it's a bit of a mess there, of course, and people wonder why America's not a little more active. Let me ask you one thing. President Bush, George W. Bush, when he came into office, came in with all these promises of doing something for Africa. And many might argue that rang a bit hollow. What happens with President Obama? Is he going to support issues such as yours, looking for a change in Somalia?
Well, I certainly think so. I mean, I think that the first reason to help Somalia is simply because it is the right thing to do. The people there need assistance, serious problems going on there for a long time. But the other reason is that there are national security issues that are raised when there's so much long-term chaos in that country. The reality is it is a place where negative political strains can crop up if there is not some order brought to people's lives there. The United States needs to be an active player there. My district has more Somalis than any other area of the United States, and so I get updates on what's happening in Somalia all the time. But I'm committed, and I hope the president will be as well.
Now, of course, one of the things that happened during the election, so many parts of the world were saying this is a man who can bring change and restore sort of America's position in the world as a leading nation. There's also the issue that perhaps because of his African roots, Africa itself expects so much. Now, again, is there being too much expectation that he's going to be doing more for Africa than anyone else has?
Again, yes, the expectations are too high. I hope that people understand that the election of Barack Obama doesn't so much guarantee a result as it offers an opportunity. And the first opportunity that needs to be taken is by the people who want to help themselves. I think that President Bush largely was a disappointment in Africa, but he did do some things like AIDS in Africa, funding that, you got to give Bush credit where it's due, and he did support AIDS funding for Africa. That can be built on. Africa, I think itself, is trying to emerge and have a democratic flowering. Even you have conflicts in Kenya that have been resolved between Kibaki and Odinga. Conflicts in Zimbabwe, as ugly as they were, seem to be being worked out by the parties involved. And that goes for many other places, Liberia and others as well. But Africa needs help. Its democracies are fragile, and it needs some support of not just the rest of the world, but also the United States.
Of course, there's been a huge grassroots movement against the war in Iraq, and Iraq, I mean, it's off the radar a little bit with other things that have been going on, but you yourself have pushed for a resolution for troop withdrawal as well.
Absolutely.
Again, where do you expect things to progress on this front once the new president's in office?
I honestly believe one of the reasons that Barack Obama is going to be president in a few days is because he took a firm stand on Iraq and said that we need to withdraw from Iraq. He said it needs to be orderly, it needs to be responsible, but we need to get out of there. And I think that if he hadn't made that stance, then he may not be in the position he's in now. Therefore, he has a mandate. Therefore, he's going to be expected to deliver on that. I think it needs to be a top priority.
How much political support do you have, though, generally, in the U.S. administration or the government in general for this kind of change, for this move on Iraq?
I think the big question is how much support in the American populace, in the electorate, and there's ample. And so I think that wise politicians are going to do what the people want them to do.
Hasn't that been the problem, that basically what the people want in America and what the politicians have been doing has been out of whack?
Two different things, isn't that right? I mean, public opinion polls and the actions of George W. Bush have been very different. But I hope that with this election that we're getting the drift, and we're going to follow our democratic mandate. And I think that the Obama administration knows that part of the reason they're in office is to get the United States out of Iraq.
One of the issues that still remains in America, which surprises a lot of people overseas, considering America's a leading nation, or the leading nation to most, is the issue of race and the divisions that still exist. And people still can't understand why the color of a person's skin matters so much in America. Now, of course, the first African-American president in history, most powerful man in the world. What difference will it really make on the ground here in America when it comes to race relations?
Well, I hope that it'll do a lot of good. I hope that when people encounter a person of color, whether they be black or Asian or whatever background, that people will simply expect that this person is as capable as any white American. And whereas in the past that expectation has not been there, the expectation is that this person is less capable, less honest, less competent, and that's the very soul of what racism is. But I think that it's hard to look at the president and feel confident about what the president is doing and then think that a person of color is not capable. So I think it will have an important effect, but it will not be an evenly set forth effect. The effects will be spotty. They will be having advances in some areas and being left behind in other areas. Persistent areas like in criminal justice, in profiling and things like that. I still think we got a long, hard slog to go.
Well, it surprised a lot of people who did hear the story, and of course it didn't get that far outside the US, but the case of the Jenner 6, and you are actively involved in commenting on this too. I mean, for those viewers who don't know much about it, take us through this high school case in Louisiana.
High school case in Louisiana. This city had historically been a place where race relations were very poor. There was a tree outside the school, which was known as the white tree. And so that meant that students of color could not go and coalesce around this tree during recess. And when they said, look, there shouldn't be any white trees, the principal was unresponsive because the principal tacitly supported the concept of the white tree. And the black students came and said, we're not going to tolerate any sort of racial exclusion on our campus. A fist fight ensued. Black students got charged with felony level offenses, even though it was really not much more than a pushing match. And students actually got charged and convicted of some pretty heinous crimes that were far out of proportion of what really happened. White students who had threatened to do awful things and had done some pretty bad things escaped without any kind of consequence at all.
And you berated the U.S. Attorney General for
I certainly did.
Donald Washington, who is an African American himself.
Yeah.
And this, I don't know if this reflects on what some people say, and that is sometimes in the African American community, those who succeed often distance themselves from their roots.
Well, one of the lies of racism is that the victim often doesn't see him or herself as its victim. So they feel that their chances of advancement lie in their ability to disassociate themselves from the masses of the people who are being oppressed. And so, yeah, you find that phenomenon quite a bit, but it's not just in the black community. You find it all over the world, and you find it even within racial classes. I mean, you know, if you look at Northern Ireland, how many people who are Irish Catholic tried to come up by going along with the system? That's a system that and that is part of what happens when people are held down for a long time.
All right. Well, Congressman Ellison, lots more questions for you, including some viewer questions we got by email. I'll get to those in just a moment. We have to take a short break now. More of our conversation with Congressman Keith Ellison in just a moment. Now, remember, you can join the conversation with your comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. You can see the debate taking place there now. We're going to be right back.
Dum